Hey, welcome back to All In with Rick Jordan. I am Rick Jordan, and I have with me Nic Marks, straight from the UK. Yeah, buddy, what's up?
Good. Nice to meet you, Rick.
Really good to meet you, my man. It's awesome. We were having a little pre-show conversation, but I'm noticing that you have a top hat up on your cabinet behind you there on your wardrobe. Yes. Dude,
I do. It's a gift from a friend. It was my birthday the other week, and he gave it me. And it's a sort of, I don't know if you know the sort of genre of steampunk. It's this
I know
sort of
punk. I don't know steampunk so much.
Well, steampunk is a sort of Victoriana, but sort of futuristic. So one of the best places that was Back to the Future 3 when they had the steam engine that went into the future.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's this sort of Victorian dress, but sort of science fiction. And him and me like that. And he gave me this top hat for me to wear at some times. I'm at the steampunk thing. So it's just a funny
Oh, that's
gift.
fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
I can see you in a top hat.
It's exceptionally tall top hat, actually.
It looks like it.
It's very tall. So it's
oh my gosh.
It's a comedic one.
Yeah, but it's a statement piece, man. And then with the shirt you have on too, it actually really goes well with that shirt because you've got the floral pattern on the inside of the collar.
Yeah, and I got a little floral pattern there, but it's yeah, I tend to just wear a little bit of flash of color or something.
Yeah.
My wife always complains because like she sort of says, all you have to do is put on a fancy shirt and everyone says you're brilliantly dressed, you know.
I think she found out our secret, man. That's about it. Yeah, I love patterned shirts. You know, I'm actually starting to go with a little more solids now just because I do so much on video.
Yeah.
You know, but when I'm not on video, man, it's the same deal. You know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like people know when we walk into a room because of the way that we're dressed. And it's a confidence piece for me. I don't know if it is for you, but people just see that as confidence. I know what I'm wearing is going to grab attention.
Yeah, I think it is a bit. And, you know, I'm a guy that sort of specializes in happiness. So it kind of goes with my sort of brand. But I've been experimenting also with like having more colored trousers and plainer tops. But it's very, very hard as a bloke to find patterned trousers, which are cool.
Yeah, right on. Yep.
Women would have got great clothing in that way, but you want something that sort of thing. So actually my stepdaughter makes clothes. So she started making me trousers because I'm a bit chubby too. So it's like, I can't just pick them off the peg. So anyway, so she started making me some, which was quite fun. So I don't know. But I do like, I don't know. I guess it's attention seeking, isn't it? I'm a bit of an extrovert. Yep. And so, you know, it's probably part of that.
Well, that's what it is, man. And I would hope that most people would want to get to that point, you know, because I think in business, you know, which you're an entrepreneur, right? In business, though, drawing attention is a very good thing. And if you don't draw attention, who's going to notice you and who's going to want to do business with you? How are they going to find you if you're not trying to go out there and grab attention? You know, but then also when you walk in, it positions you almost like above that prospect to where they want to look up to you and be to the point I've noticed anyways with me that they just want to do business with you because literally how you look. Because you have the confidence and the poise to walk in and just be flashy.
Yeah, I think that's good as long as you can follow it through with the real stuff.
Yeah. This is truth. I know. Yeah, because the appearance will only carry you so far, but you still have to open your mouth at some point, right?
I remember once this person gave this great put down to somebody where he said that he has an arrogance to which he's not entitled. Oh,
nice. Wow. He has an arrogance to which he's not entitled. That's fantastic.
So I think you've got to be a bit careful if you're gonna go be confident. I think you've got to have things to say.
You do, for sure, man. Exactly. Yeah, and that comes with, of course, it comes with time. But there's also the flip crowd, right? That, you know, first off, you don't want to be dressed too flashy, but then they also don't want to speak. And I look at those kinds of people that want to be, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, and they see guys like us and like, oh my gosh, you're doing so many cool things. Well, how do you do that? It's like, because I talk. It's because I dress. I like to communicate with people, and that actually makes me happy. The interaction with other people. I don't see very many successful people, man, that are introverts. They might be. I mean, maybe they might be able to just sit in a room in their house or something, you know, especially during COVID these days, and they can make a lot of money doing funnels and buying products. Maybe that's a good fit for them, right? And I come from the technology field too, and there's two different types of engineers that I see. There's those that sit in the back room that are amazing, brilliant, right? At, stopping the hacks from China or whatever. But those individuals, even though they're super smart and brilliant, they should never be let out to talk to people. But then there's other people like you and I that might have crossed over to what I say, the dark side, right? And we move into more of even though we know what we're talking about from the tactical perspective, we can engage in a conversation and also sell what we have too.
Yeah.
That's the dark side I call. I say that in jest, just because it is the part that I enjoy the most, is the interaction with people and drawing a reaction, because it helps them too. It helps lift them up with what we do.
Yeah, there was a good book, wasn't there, a few years ago by Daniel Pink on selling. Did you read that?
No, I didn't read that one. What does he have to say?
He's very famous for Drive, his book on human motivation, but he wrote one on selling, and it was about, even if you're a not-for-profit, you're a charity, you're still selling an idea, and how do you persuade people? And and I of course personality is part of it, and
of course it is, yeah.
But then of course there's the meat of it. There's also how well networked you are and what level of influence you have, because there's definitely power structures to move within. So there's all sorts of factors to it. But I think that charisma and extroversion is part of it. But I have always tended to be a bit of an extrovert, and I suppose one has to own the fact that one has some charisma, but you do have to be careful, because if you've got a little bit of persuasive power, you do. I've always found you have to be quite ethical in how you use that, and you have to think about what the impact you're having, and be aware that you're having an impact. Because I think when I was younger, I sometimes didn't quite realize, and then I change my mind or I do something, and and people would go, what you've done, and it's so I think you have to start thinking things through a little bit more if you're going to step into that place of being some sort of thought leader or some sort of thing about it. And and what I do to do that is, I'm a statistician, so I use data to keep me honest, and often data will disagree with my opinion, so I have to change my opinion.
Dude, that's I love that perspective, man. I really appreciate that, because ethics is like one of the foundational cores of who I am.
Yeah.
And you're right, because it's not even just sales. It's just, you said thought leader, and it's really any position of influence, right? And if only politicians would grab onto this too, man, because they're in a position of persuasion. That's what they really do, but 90% of their careers, it's what they do. And then it gets down to the 10% of the actual work to try to change the world and get laws passed. But 90% of it is trying to convince people, influence people to try to back them in order to keep them in office, get them elected to office in the first place. Yeah. So politicians, it's like changing minds, persuading minds is their number one goal. And it's almost like secondary, that's the work. Do you think that parallels, as I'm thinking about this now, do you think that parallels sales? Because it's almost like you spend 90% of the energy trying to get the sale and convince the person and persuade them that you've got a better way, that you can change their life. And then the 10% is like, okay, now we're going to fulfill it.
Yeah, I think that the narratives around it are very important. I mean, I've never been a hard salesperson, I'm not someone that, and I've always felt that if you create the right thing, people will be attractive. But of course, what was that film, the one with the baseball, build it and they will come, Field of Dreams? Unfortunately, that doesn't happen in business.
Exactly. Well, this is back to the introverts too, right? They think that they're going to build this amazing product, but they don't go talk to people. The sales don't roll in, go figure.
No, it's not a magical process. And it's like, so you do then have to think about, who you're talking about. I mean, I like to think of sales as where you're presenting a solution that actually is going to solve a problem for them. So you're helping them. And I think if you've got the right product, the right platform, whatever it is, and it is doing that, then it takes away some of the ethical things I've had about sales over the decades, in that, I came from an academic background. I came from a think tank where I used to work with public policy, and then I've only moved into business in the last 10 years, really. And I think I used to come as one of those people who's naturally suspicious of salespeople.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's quite a lot of people. And then you work out that actually, it's like adverts on the internet. I actually quite like targeted ones because they're more likely to be of interest to me, because they see what I'm doing. Some people hate them, but I go, well, there's going to be an advert in that spot. So isn't it better that it's something that you might actually want? So,
true.
But other people, they hate that. They think they're being tracked. And I'm thinking, well, it might, sometimes tell me something I actually want. So it's different opinions. I've sort of changed it, but I don't like that.
Yeah.
hard sell. But of course it does work sometimes, the hard sell. I mean, otherwise people wouldn't do it. But
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
I've moved into a position now, and I've been doing it for a long time, especially in cybersecurity, and of course now in coaching and in my own industry and just general entrepreneurs. I've moved into the position to where it's almost like a take it or leave it kind of sale. And I don't call that a hard sell.
Yeah.
It's more of, here's what I have. I know it's going to help you. Do you want it or not?
Yeah.
And I try to get to a no way faster now than I used to try to get to a yes.
Yeah.
Because the more no's that I get, that just means more energy that I don't have to waste, to me anyways. And then I can just go after the ones that are either all the way up on that 9 to 10 level of confidence, or they're the persuadables, right? To where I don't try to do anything with those who I don't feel that I can influence at all, which is why I try to go hard for the no's almost immediately. You know, it's like, tell me a reason why you wouldn't want this. That's a great question to ask in any kind of sales engagement. Tell me a reason why you don't want my service, my product, and also, hey, tell me a reason why you don't want to work with me. Those are the two different sides of it, right? Because we're talking about the product of the sale. If you just have that components, they're not, like you said, build it, they're not going to come. That's just how it is. But then you are the other component of this side too. And if you can get to a no fast enough on either of those sides, you don't have to waste your energy. That's not a hard sell. That's just saying, I'm only going to focus my intentions and my energy on those who might fall into both of those categories, to where they want my product or service and they want to work with me. It's so much simpler that way to me.
It's got to be, I'm going to take this in an obtuse way, but it's the same for dating. You actually,
it is.
You want the no's. You want the no's very quickly. And I found myself in middle-age dating again, and with a very different attitude than when I was young. Realizing that, you know, actually flushing the no was really quite good quickly. So of course, working out what your own no is, but because it's an exchange, but actually realizing that rejection is helpful.
It really is, for sure.
So, you know, and of course, when I was young, I didn't have that confidence.
Yeah, I remember going out with dudes to the bars or whatever, you know, and they'll come back to me. I mean, even in the past couple of years, they come to me like, well, I just put 2 hours into that girl for no reason at the bar. I just invested or wasted this much time on that person. If only I would have known within 2 minutes, I could have moved on to the next girl, you know, but instead I spent $300, 2 hours, and I got nothing. Oh, man. I love your perspective on things, man. This is fantastic. But there was a phrase that I mentioned, the persuadables, you know, as I said that, and I've actually never said that word. I've never even heard that word before until yesterday. And it's fun that you're from the UK today, because this is where my brain is today. I'm going to give you a little insight into the circus that's in my head right now. Okay. I was on the plane yesterday coming back from Vegas because I was pitching TV producers for my new movie that's coming out, and just general TV segments. Got booked across the US, which is awesome. Even in the top 2 and 3 markets, LA and Chicago. That's great. Not something new to me. It's something I've been doing for a few years. But on the plane, on the way home, you know, of course I downloaded things from Netflix, right? Because I work a little, it's a 4-hour flight. I work a little, I try to consume some information. This documentary was on Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah, I've seen that documentary.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing, man, because of course I knew of and this is the whole reason why Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress 2 years ago. But watching this documentary, man, and then it's just crazy because now you know, it's just weird correlations to me inside my head. Now I'm talking to you. You're in the UK, right? And we're talking about the persuadables from a sales perspective. We're talking about targeted ads, the adverts as well. That's exactly what they were doing. And it was
so just to make it more spooky, I am a data analyst, and I did go to University of Cambridge.
Oh my gosh, no way.
But I have nothing to do with Cambridge Analytica.
This is fantastic. This show is going to be so interesting. We might go the hour and a half, brother. Let's see. That's awesome. That's so crazy. All right, so I'm watching the documentary, right? And I'm seeing how the ways that they did this, and the way that Facebook, you know, they had a partnership, of course, but their app had special permissions. You know, I'm in cybersecurity, which has a lot to do with privacy too. And it was mind-blowing to me because Facebook just opened the doors wide open to Cambridge Analytica for this app, which was a survey app. And you know the story. The survey app was able to target people politically, you know, but they did not really focus on those that were on either two extremes. And this was interesting to me too, because we're tying this back to sales now. The ones that were just hardcore for Hillary Clinton at that point in time, you know, and this is also important for the US anyways, because it's another election year. And what's running right now? A bunch of social ads for both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's all you see for the most part if you're in the United States. And it was interesting to me because they did not go after the hardcore Hillary supporters. And if they targeted them, if through this thing, their mind was already made up and they were full Trump supporters at the time, the only things that they would show to the Trump supporters in the adverts were just triumphant photos of Donald Trump, just to get them pumped up, you know, and strengthen their support. They were already there, but they didn't target them as much. It was only like 20% of their ad spend was over on that group. 80% of their ad spend was right down the middle in what they called the persuadables, those who could switch. In that campaign, they were spending $1 million a day at the height of it in social ads, and 90% of it was on Facebook versus other platforms, in order to target this crowd and paint Hillary as just this deplorable, mean, risky person if she were to get into office. And I was looking at the ad spend across the board, and it was something like they ran, it was something like 387 million ads, something crazy, versus Hillary's 66 million ads. You know, there was just this huge difference. And I'm seeing this, and you're talking about data analytics, and I'd love you to speak to this more, man, because you're looking at the difference. It's not that they outspent them, or outspent them. It was more that they were just really focusing on a way to where they could get in front of people all the time. And the data sets were showing that it would work best if it was those who could change their mind, not those whose mind was already set.
It's interesting, really, because obviously it's a completely new way of running adverts, political adverts. And I once met this guy at a conference, and he introduced me to a new term. So we always talk about broadcasting,
Yeah.
But the opposite of that is called narrowcasting. And that's what this is about. And it's narrowcasting because it's basically looking to identify individuals of very small groups. And he said there's no reason why we couldn't make it illegal to narrowcast do political broadcast narrowcasting. Because basically what it used to be when I was young was they'd do one political broadcast. I mean, this is in the UK, but I imagine it was relatively similar in the US. You'd have one advert that went across all the channels, and you kind of like, you know, that was what you got. Yeah. And so, and the narrowcasting, he just says he thinks is exceptionally dangerous for politics because it's impossible to police, and it's also very, very manipulative. And so he was pro the idea that we should ban political adverts narrowcasting, and I just thought that's such a great word, narrowcasting.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing, man. So he wants to ban that, but you also say that or that was his thought process, right?
Yeah.
I understand the ethical implications of this too. I mean, I just watched the documentary, and it was crazy to me. Yeah, it's my brain's very analytical that way. I struggle. My left and right kind of fight each other sometimes because I've got the creative that pumps up, and I also have the analytical side that pumps up. Those brain tests, man, I always fell right in the middle. Which drove all my professors and educators nuts, all my teachers, because they couldn't figure me out, because that was just it. But, you know, and I could switch on a dime too whenever I needed to, which was great. But this, I'm just sucking in all this information, and then I go to the creative side of my head and thinking exactly what you are, because this narrowcasting, those persuadables were such a tiny group.
Yeah.
You know, and they were targeting them, but it was if they could target them they called them precincts too. You know, they separated the country into these different precincts inside different states. And then they went after just a few targeted individuals that were most likely to be persuaded, but also those who would also share the information more freely. You know, so it was mind-blowing. And you just saw how it caught like wildfire, this idea, you know, and you're right, it's very manipulative.
It's also a structure partly of both the US and the UK process where we have local winner takes all situations. Because, you know, if it was just one person, one vote in the US, I mean, obviously Clinton would have won, but that's a different matter. But you wouldn't, this narrowcasting wouldn't be so important, because basically you're trying to flip Florida, you're trying to flip Wisconsin or wherever it is, you know, you're trying to flip states, and then you get all of the, what do they call them? The seats. You don't call them seats, you call them something else. All of the...
Oh, in Congress, you're talking the electorals. Yeah.
The electorals, you get all the electoral votes, whatever it is. So you get a certain whatever. So you know, and you've got a couple of states where they don't do all winner takes all, do you? You've got a couple of states where it can go 3-1, 2-1. And if you did that, then this narrowcasting would become less important. And actually, it would be more democratic to.
It would be, for sure.
Yeah, just have every vote everywhere in the country count the same. Doesn't matter whether you're in California or.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I have decent knowledge of the government structure of the UK. Not crazy knowledge. I don't know how deep knowledge you have of. It seems like you have some good knowledge.
I have some, yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me too, because there's electorates that exist. And you're talking about the difference now between a democracy and a democratic republic. Which the United States is a democratic republic.
Yeah.
Which means that there are representatives that are chosen for everything.
Yeah.
And those representatives, they can be Congress, they can be in the Senate, they can be in the House of Representatives, but even local states have senates and they have a House of Representatives in the state body. And these electorates, though, man, they are also voting representatives of each individual person that's there. And they're divided into sections too, into districts. Yeah. And those are really the ones. This is the crazy thing, is that everyone thinks, oh, my vote counts towards president, right? Or electing really towards the president of the United States. It really doesn't, in a way, which is interesting to me, because your vote is supposed to tell the electorate, which is your voting representative, which way to vote. And then sometimes you can have rebellious electorates too. And this was the case in 2016. When I remember some in Texas, which is predominantly a red state, right, a Republican state, there were some electorates that just did not support Donald Trump. And I can't remember the specific term for the electorate, but they go against the will of the people that they're supposed to represent. Yeah. And it's not even an elected official, it's an appointed official by something. I can't remember this, but that's even more interesting. And I remember one dude was a fireman that went against it, right? So it can literally be anybody that's an electorate. That's part of the party. And your vote is supposed to tell that person which way they are supposed to vote for their area, for their state, one of their electorates. So if it's Illinois, I think Illinois has 29 electoral votes. That means there's 29 electorates, I'm sure I'm wrong on the number.
Presumably it's when people literally had to get on a horse and go to Washington.
Yeah.
Go, this was our votes.
Exactly.
Like,
that's almost how it is. Exactly. Yeah. Right on. I mean,
we don't really need that anymore. We could just count each individual one, but but it's I don't know whether if the Democrats got in, would they be brave enough to try and get something like that through, and what would it require? But in many ways, it would make sense, because it's sort of illogical, really, that that each American vote isn't the same. But these things have got a lot of sort of inertia in changing these systems, and so probably
for sure. And this is a system that's been in place for a couple centuries now, too.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a different story. And there was good reasons, of course, for the way that this was written to begin with. Yeah. But I'm always the guy asking questions. And this is more rhetorical than anything else. Should it be changed now? Is that a better way to go by complete popular votes? Because the whole way the United States is set up is that it is United States, individual governing bodies, and there's different laws, and it ties down to almost like with the UK, right? You have different countries that belong to the United Kingdom.
At the moment, just about to lose one, I reckon, soon.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't blame them either. The Scots probably will vote for independence in the next 3-5 years, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's been on the table for a long time.
I mean, who knows what that means, because
don't you see that as kind of being cyclical? Because then there's also states, like this comes up sometimes with California, right? That they're going to succeed from the United States, secede from the United States. But then we're states in the South too, because we've got the history of the Civil War 150 years ago. Yeah. But I mean, it's not like the history of the UK isn't all clean and not bloody either.
No, I mean the only thing is that we're predominantly an island, aren't we? So if Scotland becomes a separate country, that breaks that up. I mean, there's a logic, you can see a sort of geographical logic to Northern Ireland and Ireland becoming united, though. Yeah, clearly that's a very hot topic, because it's been fought over for 150 years. So it's not like me saying it means anything, but Scotland going independent means it breaks up the Britain, the island of Britain.
Yeah.
So
with Wales being on top, my grandmother was born in Wales, which is pretty fun. I'm predominantly Irish, which is also another funny story because my mother always told me I wasn't, but my last name is Jordan. Then I did it was the 23andMe test or the Ancestry DNA test or whatever it was, and it came back 67% Irish. Like, sorry, Mom. This is just the way that it is.
You see, that's our fault, the English, because we were so appalling to the Irish that they all emigrated, because, famine and, lack of opportunity for Irish in England and mainland Britain. And so, there's a lot of history of that's coming home to roost with England and Britain, and there's a complexity there. And obviously leaving the European Union is sort of, well, I'm someone that would prefer to have stayed, so I see it as a regressive, a sort of slightly idealized view of the past, and not understanding that actually we're just a small nation and we don't matter much about being part of a bloc. But there are other people who think, we should go back to being that. But then you go, well, okay, what about England and Scotland? Then you go, well, actually, it was the French that invaded us anyway, and the Vikings came before. It's like, where do you draw a line? It's like
for sure, my man. And a little secret of mine too, maybe not so much a secret for everybody that knows me. Even though I'm mostly Irish, I much prefer Scotch over than I do Irish whiskey. It's just, I don't know. It just is the way that it is. The Irish whiskey just seems inferior and less refined, less classy.
If I'm drinking a blended one, I quite like a Jameson's, which is Irish. And if I'm drinking malts, you always prefer Scots. But I'm not a big whiskey drinker because it normally comes out at a dangerous time of night when you definitely should be stopping drinking rather than carrying on. So I have learned over the years to say, no, I'll have peppermint tea.
This is true because that can go either way, can't it? Because most of the time I'll start with Scotch and then I'll move into wine with my dinner. But you're right, man, because then you can flip back too and have that delicious digestif, which can be a Scotch too. But then that's where it gets dangerous sometimes because it just tastes so good. You've got the decent Scotch at the beginning, right? But then the digestif is really like you're going for like a Macallan 18 or a Macallan 25. You save the best for the last, and that's where you could just keep going. I hear you.
It just gets messy.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, this is great. We digressed a little bit into the world of what we both what we both enjoy. But this is interesting, because there's a lot of government shakeups that are going on around the world. COVID especially, man, accelerated a lot of these talks. Yeah. And there's just unrest in a lot of places. And are our governments doing as much as they possibly can for this? Well, what's the problem? What did that shake down like, because you're in England, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that look around by you, as far as like civil unrest through this period?
There hasn't really been very much civil unrest in the UK. I mean, we if you look at it from a statistical or from a analytical perspective, we clearly shut down 2 weeks too late in retrospect, and that was a mistake. There was this idea that we'd get this herd mentality, which is very appealing to the sort of Boris Johnson conservative, slightly libertarian political thing, which is that, people should, choose and don't want to affect freedom. So I in some ways, I think I personally, as someone that's quite centralist and moderate, I found it quite forgivable that they made that mistake. I mean, it's a little unfortunate for some people who had early deaths, but we had a much higher death rate than we probably would do. But the UK has so many ports of entry that they probably reckon that had about 3,000 different routes into the UK COVID. So it'd have been very difficult. If we'd shut down earlier, we would have stopped it spreading more. But we have pretty much shut it down, and I think that's a very big difference between the UK and the US in that, we do have very low instances of new cases. Of course, it's rising again now that we've opened up again, and there were problems, with outbreaks in certain areas. We have problems of multiple generation households in immigrant communities, ethnic communities, poorer communities who live more on top of each other. We have this problem that young people kind of think they're invincible, and they kind of are, in that it doesn't really kill them, and they want to party, quite understandably. And so, we have this thing that now, raves are illegal and this is illegal, and older people go, well, tut, they shouldn't do this. And you're thinking, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's entirely rational for them to go, I don't really care if I get it, and I don't want to put my life on hold. So it's a little bit, there are those edges, but the predominant thing is that we have rearranged how people work. You know, people are now working from home and relatively happily. There were definitely some big learnings around work-life balance.
Of course.
Big learnings to come about how people collaborate and how creative they can be when they're not in the same office. So there are definite points there, but there's all sorts of goods. You know, there's less commuting. There is, you know, more time with your children if you've got young children, which has, you know, clearly always been a big problem for people who work, you know. So there are some good things in there too. And then there's the real estate saving, which is that if big companies, you know, can cut their expenditure on real estate by a third by perhaps only having people in 1-2 days a week. Yeah. Well, there's a big win there. Yeah. Big loss for anyone that owns housing or real estate, but a big gain for businesses. So there's lots of things that surely take a lot of time to settle. And we're not in a settled position at the moment, but so there's a lot going on, but we're relatively calm. I mean, I also live in rural England now. I mean, I did have a lifestyle where I was in London 3-4 days a week, and I lived out here for long weekends. Now I just live here all the time. So I'm kind of immune from it in many ways. I mean, I go to London occasionally, but I don't know. It's such a weird thing, and it's got a long way to go till it settles down.
Yeah, it does. I'm with you on that. And of course, vaccines are coming now. And you know, I don't know how it is in the UK, but there's a lot of Americans. I just saw the stat yesterday that 40% of Americans are saying they don't want to get the vaccine. Yeah, and I don't know if that's necessarily younger people or not. It didn't go into the data as far as that goes. But I do see that a lot, you know. And it was also interesting when I was in Vegas just over this past weekend. I have a regular driver that's there. You know, it's cool because I was in an Uber Black coming from the airport, and then this guy his name's Kyle. He has become my regular driver in Vegas because I'm there for business a lot. So now, I mean, even before I'm flying in, it's like, okay, I'm going to stop at Costco. You want me to get you a 24-pack of water or anything else before it's fantastic.
Good service. You know,
I know, exactly.
Yeah,
it saves so much time, man. And time is one of the most precious commodities too.
Yeah.
And so I don't skimp on those kinds of things. It's finding good people that will help support what you're doing. And when I was talking to him, he goes, I just had the antibody test. You know, the test that shows if you actually have had it or not yet. Yeah. And he goes, I had the highest level possible of antibodies, you know, and he's maybe 35 years old. Yeah. He goes, I didn't feel a thing.
Yeah.
You know, I never even knew I had this thing, but I've got the highest level of antibodies possible. And then it's interesting too, because of statistics, and then I'll get back to the UK and the US, because there's something else I saw the other day too. The statistics are now showing that it's the CDC in the United States has now looked at the data, because you're a data analyst, right? And I love data too, man. I do. I don't look at it much, except when the work's already done, and then I consume the results, right? But they are now saying that 6% of people have died from COVID alone in the United States, which means that 94% have had a comorbidity, meaning there is something else going on. You know, and you see that across the entire world too, I believe. You know, is that there's always some other statistic that exists there, you know, and they listed like the top 8 things, right? Yeah. Before they went to and other causes at the very bottom. But in the top 8, of course, was heart disease, lung disease, obesity, high blood pressure, hypertension. But also in that list, which was very mind-boggling to me, was the fact that they also listed like accidental or intentional injury. What's another thing, including poisoning and other adverse events. Meaning, if in the United States, this is the craziest thing. Say you have a gunshot wound. I know the UK doesn't really carry guns, right? They don't really exist in the UK. But if they do in the US, everybody knows that, right? Everybody pictures the United States as their breakfast is like this big, like 2-pound plate of bacon with a gun next to it. That's not so, by the way, everybody out there, because we're worldwide, but not so. But in the United States, it's like if you got a gunshot wound, you know, during one of the riots or something like that are going on, and you go to the hospital, but then in the autopsy, you die from the gunshot wound. But then during the autopsy, they test you and you test positive for COVID. They mark you down as dying for COVID. So the stats are just ridiculous, man. And I don't know if this is the case in the UK or anywhere else. But
the statistical way of really looking at this is what they call excess deaths. And so we know pretty much in the UK how many people normally die in a year. It's roughly 500,000. It might be 600,000. Okay, it's somewhere in that order. Yeah, and we've had, and I'm not going to get the exact figures. I haven't got it in front of me. But we've had something like 6 or 7% extra deaths in the period from, March until July, August. Yeah.
Huh. So you're talking the people above and beyond who would
Yeah,
normally
so
die from
you'd
other
expect
causes.
a certain number of people to die in that period,
Yeah.
and you've got 6% more.
Huh.
So, whether that's a COVID death, whether it's a cancer death because you haven't had treatment because COVID has had problems,
Okay.
you've got these other ways that, so now what they don't know. So that is probably the best way to measure it. And so there's two things to say about that, which is that 6% extra deaths is bad, but it's not the plague.
Sure. Exactly.
It's not the death rate has tripled or something suddenly.
Yeah.
It's 6% extra deaths. So that's it's not great, but it's not like massive. And the next thing to say is how many of those are early deaths? Are we actually going to dip below in the next 6 months? Because basically a lot of people would just have died 6 months early, and that's still a loss. I'm not saying that's not a loss, and every life is a loss, but it's less. It seems to me less of a disaster that some people have died 6 months earlier than they were going to, than if someone who was 25 is suddenly dead when they had the whole life ahead of them.
Sure.
So there's sort of like lost years of life rather than just lost life. And then it's a very, very real effect, the 6%. But how much do we want to? How much extra stress are we going to cause to ourselves from the economic collapse? How much more extra stress are we going to cause from increased mental health issues because people are locked down, because they're going to be poorer? We've definitely seen an increase in domestic violence in the UK. I'd be surprised if you don't see an increase in deaths by gunshot, because of clearly domestic violent deaths are often gunshot.
Exactly. Yep. And we have. You got it.
Yeah. We're going to see these other externalities which are partly to do with how we do it. So it's a very, very difficult issue. But in March, it's very easy now looking back in beginning of September, to March, but March was really scary. Genuinely, it's the most anxious I felt, going out in public. I'm a very relaxed person, and I'd get on the underground, the tube as we call it, and I'd be looking at people thinking, have they got it? Have they got it? And I'm suddenly anxious and thinking about what I'm touching. And it wasn't pleasant at all. My mother is 85. We moved her to my sister's. We were really worried about her catching it. So I think we all did the right thing, trying to shut it down, and now we have to learn how to live with it, because even a vaccine won't cure it all. So
for sure,
so it's hard, and I know that the US with its layers of government has got very many different ways of doing it. I know that central government's lost control of the messaging in the US much more than in Europe. Yeah. So there's very many mixed messages, so it's much harder. But also, the US death rate is high, but you're a huge country. I don't know what your excess death rate is, but I think it's lower than the UK's. I think it's, I think the excess death rate will be less than 6% in the US.
That's interesting.
I don't know that, but I think it is. I think it's just below. The UK's definitely got one of the highest excess. Your problem is it's still running quite free, and ours is much more controlled now.
Yeah, for sure.
And
excess deaths. Look at that right at the top from the CDC. Right, I don't know if I can find it quickly. They're always so wordy. Why don't they just put what I want to know right at the top of the article? A range estimate. The visualization includes several different estimates. I mean, they're going through and explaining it already, but shouldn't you put the information at the top and then give you everything else? What in the world? Weekly number of excess deaths. Okay. And this is funny too, according to what you're saying, because it says weekly number of excess deaths from all causes.
Yeah.
Not just COVID, but from all causes. That's crazy.
That's what you want, yeah. If our things were suddenly causing many fewer traffic accidents, kind of a benefit. If they were causing many more other, it's costs and benefits. But that's definitely the best statistical way of tracking is excess deaths.
Sure, no doubt. You're looking at 2020, and it looks like it's almost leveled off now too, because on the graph that I'm looking at right now, there's a line that is that's the norm, right? And it looks like the United States fluctuates typically between somewhere between 50,000 and 60,000 deaths per week.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, because
this is pre-COVID too. It looks like
you're 4 times the size of us, and we're about 50,000-60,000 a month. So that's about right.
Yeah, for sure. There was a little blip that went up to 80,000 for 1 week in the United States.
Yeah.
What I'm looking at here. So that you're talking like a 30% increase, right? But that was one single week. Other than that, instead of being between 50 and 60,000, we are now between what it looks like, 52,000. So what is that? 2,000 of 50,000 is
4% extra.
4%. Yeah, exactly. And that's fluctuating with the normal curve. And you can even see the curve spikes up during the winter months.
Yeah.
Of the United States because of influenza and everything else too.
Yeah.
That doesn't change. You can see it's just like a peaks and valleys, and the peaks are always around the winter months. And we're already back down to where it is. And we're still just 2% over for this past week. So excess deaths looks like it's anywhere between, it fluctuates on a weekly basis, but between 2% and 6%, which is where the UK is, of excess deaths, again, from all causes.
Yeah, so we were at 6%. We're no longer at 6%.
Yeah,
but we were. In fact, we're below because some of the people that were hanging on got taken earlier. I mean, and again, it's not to belittle that. And actually, I think one of the most disturbing things I found about it was not that older people were dying; it was that they were dying alone.
Yeah,
that their family wasn't allowed. And that I just think is heartbreaking because you want to be with your loved ones, don't you? And I think that was probably the most inhumane thing going on, was people dying alone. And maybe they could get an iPad and talk to somebody, but that's pretty miserable.
It still is, yeah. People, I mean, human beings, we're made to be, unless you live in Switzerland or something like that, or Sweden, right? Because they're not. I had somebody on from over there the other day. She goes, we squash it because we're just distant people, anyways. we always do that. We have this big bubble of personal space, but generally speaking, human beings are made to have close contact. Because we're emotional human beings, and you're in the business of happiness. Yeah. Right. I can't imagine how much that was just saddening your heart during this when you saw those, because I've heard those stories. I'm filming my documentary on government overreach that releases in just a couple of weeks. And I'm sitting there in a church listening to these stories about the pastors not even be able to go in, and the families not being able to go into the hospital. Yeah. While their loved ones were dying. So I'm with you, my man. How did that, and then your mother too, 85 years old.
But she's fine. She went to my sister's, but I mean, that was the fear, wasn't it? The fear was that, because she lives alone because my father passed 4 years ago. And my actual worry for her was loneliness. It wasn't actually dying. I mean, my mum's quite cool, and she goes, well, darling, something's going to get me, sort of thing. And, but dying alone,
awesome woman.
dying alone, or being stuck at home alone, and you could see it coming because Italy had already gone into lockdown and Spain had, and we were looking at it and I was thinking, God, they're going to do that to us. Well, probably they are, aren't they? And so I was trying to get her moved, and one of my sisters could easily have her. And so she went to stay with my sister, but she didn't like it. She's very independent, my mum. Yeah. But it was actually, she totally recognizes it was great. So she was at my sister's, I don't know, through to May. So she probably had 3 months, not living at home, but she's delighted. She's back at home now, and presumably she'll go through this winter there, but it's changed now. So I think it's, we'll see.
Yeah, I know. Who knows where all this is going to go, man. Yeah. We've covered the gamut of things today, man. I mean, but the common thread that I've loved is just statistics and data analysts. Yeah, data analysis, which is so much fun to talk about. The data never lies, right?
Wow. I mean,
I knew I was going to get that from you.
There's the old phrase, lies, damn lies, and statistics, and I think statistics can be presented very poorly. So, sorry, the sun's just suddenly coming.
No, you're good, man.
Okay. Anyway, I've got a skylight on there.
I set you up for this one, right?
I'm actually very critical of how a lot of public statistics are presented, and I think that they don't present risk very well. And actually, most of us people are smart. We assess risk every day. Yeah, we step out of our house, we get in a car, we take a risk, and so and often, people don't present it very. So, typical thing you'll say is like, if you eat bacon, you've got a 13% extra chance of getting colon cancer, something like that. Yeah. And you're like, okay, right. Well, actually, you're really unlikely to get colon cancer. So basically what that means is that instead of something like 7 in 1,000 people getting colon cancer, 8 in 1,000 people get cancer,
Yeah.
which is a 13% increase. So it sounds very dramatic, but if you don't understand what the risk of getting it is, and so, there's a lot of pressure to change lifestyles, whatever. I mean, I don't know if you know, but, if you were to put in order of effect on life expectancy, smoking, obesity, and happiness, which has the biggest effect on life expectancy?
Wow. Dude, my mind is blown.
It's happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness has, if you unhappy, struggling with mental health issues or just generally miserable, you're going to die young because you're putting your whole body under stress, because basically, what's happening is that, when you're unhappy, you're basically in a fight or flight situation. So you're very primed all of the time, and you're anxious and distressed, and so it's huge pressure on you. And we know that we have friends who are going under a particularly stressful period of their life, and they look rubbish. Everything, and of course they're feeling rubbish and they're looking rubbish. Yeah. Whereas if you're feeling good, whatever, then you're basically feeling safe and secure, and your body isn't preparing to be injured or fighting, and it can look after itself much more. So happiness is probably, if you're going from sort of people who are really quite unhappy to people quite happy, it's probably 10, 12 years of difference in life expectancy.
Wow.
Whereas, smoking and body mass index together are probably less than 10. And you can say happiness in different ways. You can talk about being social relationships. You can talk about it, and Susan Pinker's done a good TED talk on social relationships. And basically it's the same as happiness in lots of ways, because if you're socially connected, you're more likely to be happy. So we're talking about the same effect. You can measure it in ways, call it different things. But, other people are hugely important to us for our life expectancy, for our quality of life. And so, I'm always very, very keen that we find solutions that work with people. Like, one of my sisters is going that, my mum's 84, 85, she's borderline diabetic, Nick. She really shouldn't have sugar. And you're thinking, I don't think that's going to kill her.
Yeah.
If she has sugar in her tea, it's a pleasure to her. It's a daily pleasure to her.
Sure.
Her gin and tonic at 6 p.m. is a daily pleasure to her. And actually that's more important than a theoretical extra couple of months of life. My father was very keen on ice cream and cream. And in his 80s, he did get bigger and bigger. But as I said in my eulogy to him, the cream didn't kill him. It was prostate cancer. It was not the cream. And, he maybe should have had more cream. He maybe should have had more creem. And
he might have been happier.
Well, it's like he didn't hold back, my father. So there was not really a trade-off going on. But his sort of slight excessive personality and everything wasn't what killed him. And so, we have to be careful with how these things are. And for me, experience of life is the most important thing to think about, and one of the reasons I've become interested and fascinated in my career creating metrics and data on it is because if you put numbers on it, people can take it seriously. If you don't, then it just it's a shame some people don't feel great. But if you know exactly how many people don't and what causes it, and then you can start creating public policy, which is what I used to work in businesses. You can start thinking about which teams are unhappy, how can you look after them more. And if you have the data, everyone takes it seriously more. So, and I had this kind of odd mixture in my background is I'm a statistician, but I also trained as a therapist. So I had these sort of, and so I think I try to bring those two together and think about, well, what's most important to people and how do we put a number on it?
There it is. Exactly. What is most important to people? And you're talking in generalities too, for the majorities, because even when you're talking about those, 13% increases, right? If you eat more bacon or whatever it is, from that 6 to that 8 people, right? That 13% increase, who does that matter to, really? It matters to those 2 people and the families of those 2 people. So that's where a lot of this hones in on. But the negative thoughts tend to really drive a lot of things in our society, I feel, which is bad for me, right? Because what is it? It takes 10 happy thoughts to overshadow just one negative thought, or the reverse. One negative thought can outshine 10 happy thoughts. I'm sure you've heard that cliche. You're the expert on that, but it always seems to me like that 13%, and while very tragic, man, I know, because I'm not a dude who's never struggled with loved ones dying, right? My dad passed away when I was 16. That was horrific, and it was from leukemia. And it's not like I haven't been through stuff and I'm just somebody that's spouting crap off the top of my head. I've been through losing people close to me. But I would still rather live in a position of happiness and understanding that stuff is going to happen and focus on me and what I can do, rather than focusing on what everybody else should do for me, because I can't really control that.
No.
I can control wholly 100% what I'm doing for me, but I cannot control the actions, the behaviors of everybody else and what I feel they should do for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, psychologists call it locus of control, and like what is within your control and what isn't. And of course, it's slightly fluid in that we do influence. So what we put out does influence things. So we do influence that. And so, the old phrase is, if you smile, the world smiles with you is at least partly true, in the sense that, if we put out good vibes, we get them back. But also, we have to look. For me, people often say to me, "Okay, what is happiness?" And we can think about it as an emotion. We can think about it as a sort of process. But part of it for me is actually feeling that you can cope with the future. That that there's a security that comes to that, because there's obviously be a strong pleasure part of happiness. It's like, does this feel tasty now? Is this nice? Is it whatever it can be? And there's there's a past part to it, in the sense of like, our past shapes us, and we've got a genetic component. But the thing that most interests me is how does the present affect the future, and how do we shape that? And in that sense, feeling good about ourselves now, feeling able to how would you say it? To choose how we react to situations.
For sure.
Sometimes called self-regulation, but it's how do we take our emotional material and then choose how to do it? Because there might be something that's upsetting us, that's making us feel angry, but that doesn't mean to say we should go and punch somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not to say there's never an occasion to be violent. I think there obviously are. In fact, there's a friend of ours. It's one of these not good stories about divorce, and as is often the case, but not always, the man's gone and done something stupid, and his 16-year-old son, met his dad for the first time in 6 months, having his dad slightly abandoned the family, and he just got so cross he hit him. And I actually think that was a really congruent response from a 16-year-old to his son. I'm not saying I condone someone hitting it, but I said to him as an older man, I understand why you hit him, and I don't think you should feel bad about hitting him, And his dad was so shocked that that's the reaction he got from his 16-year-old son. That he needs to understand the implication he's had on it. So it's a long story to say that we have choices how we react, and obviously sometimes we're less graceful about how we react than others.
Sure. Yep, I'm with you.
And that's of course where it's good to apologize, whatever. But it's, it's choice. And for me, a sort of good definition of wisdom is saying that, we can access our emotional debts, but we rationally choose how we engage with the world.
For sure. I love that, my man. Yeah. You've been amazing, for real. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation.
Definitely. Yes.
This is great. I love that you're a happiness expert too, but can I send people to you? Because I would love everybody to follow you, because you've just got fantastic straight line views on everything in the world, it seems. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so I have a personal website, nicmarks.org. I spell Nick without a K. My main thing I do is I'm the CEO of a business which measures and improves employee happiness. We're called Friday Pulse. And we basically on a Friday ask people how was their week. We create data for C-suite, for team leaders on how their teams are feeling, and help them talk about that data and improve the workplace for it. And so that's called fridaypulse.com. And you can go there, and we've got a little video showing what we do. And actually we're free to any organization between sort of 25 and 1,000 people for 3 months at the moment. So people could try it, and then, so that's the soft sell. If we go back to the beginning, come and try what we're doing. You find it useful, you can start paying, so.
That's awesome. And Twitter, you are, I am Nic Marks.
Right? I'm pretty bad at Twitter, but it's me. I am Nic Marks. It should be, I am bad at Twitter. That should be my handle. Probably.
For sure. It's NICMARKS.org.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And thanks for being on. I really enjoyed it. You lifted me up today, man. Just having some real data-driven conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Well, anyway, that's good. I do like my data.
Yeah.
And I like communicating it, as you can tell. It's like that's when data comes alive for me, is when we can influence, help people make better decisions, basically, whether that is governments, whether that's individuals, whether that's businesses.
I love it. Cool, man. Well, thanks, my man. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Cheers.